Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 2nd of June, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So there's been a bit of drama around the OP airdrop. So there's two parts to it, I think. I think one of the bits of drama is just the general vibe towards airdrops these days. There's a lot of entitlement around it. There's a lot of people thinking that they should have gotten more than what they got. There's a lot of people kind of angry that they basically tried to farm the airdrop and it didn't succeed because their address gets filtered out and all that sort of stuff there. But something unique to Optimism and the OP airdrop was a forum post that was kind of like posted by, not by someone from the team. I think people got the wrong idea. No one from the Optimism team posted this, but someone posted something on the forum, on the governance forum, basically saying, hey, we shouldn't give any future airdrops to people who have sold Uniswap, Optimism's first airdrop. And this obviously ignited a lot of discussion within the community. And one person in particular, Cobie, decided to kind of like weigh in with, all the reasons why this is a bad idea. Now, the actual post itself, you can go give a read. But what I want to focus on is kind of like his reasons for why he thinks it's a bad idea to basically, I guess, bar users from getting future airdrops just because they sold the first one. And I resonate a lot with his reasoning here. So let's just go through it one by one. So that his first reason is that people sell because they think the valuation of OP is currently too high and they can wait until it becomes aligned with their expectations in order to participate in governance and thus have a larger governance share. So I think this is true for a lot of kind of like tokens in general. I mean, as I said, I don't particularly want to spend too much time talking about the price or valuations of these things, but if you look at past tokens and how they've been distributed, and if they have a low circulating supply and a high fully diluted value, more often than not they trend down, right? So that might be something people are kind of like playing defensively against. They don't want to be stuck kind of like holding the bag if it was kind of like overvalued to them, and maybe later on they'll buy back in when they think it's a fair value. And I've seen a few people in the Discord channel say that, and that's a totally kind of like valid thing to do, right? And then Cobie's second point here is, people think that the valuation is okay, but they expect a post-airdrop dump. They want to buy lower and they think they can sell quickly before this airdrop dump happens and rebuy more OP. Again, this goes to the trend of most of the airdrops that we see, especially in bear markets where, they have a lot of hype behind them. I mean, OP was one of the most hyped kind of like tokens and airdrops, and they start off at a really high valuation and then trend down over time. You can go look at so many different tokens, even if they're part of, really, really amazing projects. ENS, for example, tokens been down only because it launched it launched, it got a lot of hype, and then it was a high fully diluted coin. Not as bad as others, they did a healthy airdrop for people, but still, right? Generally, it was definitely kind of like fits in that DYDX, things like that, right? So yeah, I mean, the valuation maybe is, can be okay as well on some of these things, but more likely than not, there's usually an airdrop dump, right? Because people want to sell the free money that they got. So some people will kind of wait for that to happen and be like, okay, well, I'll sell now and then I'll wait and buy back in, sort of thing. Cobie's third point here is, the airdrop is meaningfully large for a person's net worth, so selling some tokens makes a big difference to them, but they still believe in the future of Optimism. Again, totally resonate with this. Look, guys, depending on how many tokens you got, this could be $1,000 airdrop or it could be $10,000 airdrop, right? So even $1,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people. Imagine, you said to someone kind of that's not even in crypto, hey, here's this kind of free $1,000 from this airdrop that you got from basically just being active within kind of the crypto community, but don't sell it because you might not get tokens in the future. I mean, it's just kind of silly, right? So of course they're going to sell it, and why shouldn't they? I very much encourage people to sell it if it's kind of money that could really improve their lives. That $1,000 can go a long way for a lot of people, and a lot of times it's more than that. So yeah, again, totally don't blame people for wanting to sell if it's kind of meaningful for their net worth as well, right? Next point, people sold on airdrop addresses and rebought on other addresses to anonymize their on-chain activity. Again, legitimate thing to do. Might be a bit kind of tricky with taxes and things like that. I'm not sure how many people do this, but there is definitely a class of people that do. And then obviously he mentions the tax obligations, and I talked about this yesterday. That is probably one of the main reasons people would sell, I would say, because as soon as you claim it in a lot of jurisdictions, it's basically taxed as normal income, and you have to basically cash out some to pay the tax, or if you've got the money already, you don't have to kind of pay it, but you still have to record it, and you don't have to cash out the tokens to pay it, you can probably pay it from other money that you've got, but you still have to record it, right? So, but a lot of the times people just kind of cash out what they need for taxes there. And there's last 2 points here. People are selling 90% of their crypto portfolio because they are scared of the bear market, but they will rebuy in a couple of years. Of course, that makes total sense as well. And they are fucking wrecked, and this income helps them a lot. Maybe one day, if they're no longer wrecked, they can afford to participate in governance of the projects they believe in again. Again, this goes back to his other point about people selling because it's a material part of their net worth. And yeah, if you're wrecked, if your portfolio has been down only because you bought at the top in November of 2021 and you're still around, definitely you want to be taking all the money you can get. And I don't blame people for that again. Now, definitely go read kind of like Cobie's post here. It's quite lengthy and dives deeper into this stuff. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of like highlight the reasons why people would kind of like sell, even if they're bullish on optimism and OP, even if they want to participate in governance. There are always reasons why people kind of like want to sell these things. And look, I thought it was just the original proposal was interesting, but interesting doesn't mean that I think it's good or bad. It just means that like it caught my attention. It was like, oh, okay, I've thought of this before in the past. I've thought about how to do airdrops like differently a lot of times, and I've spoken about it on the refuel because I think airdrops at this point in time are mostly broken and mostly don't lead to the outcomes that people want them to lead to. It's all well and good for people to get free money. Like I'm happy for people who get this money and it's actually making a material difference to their lives. But in saying that, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of entitlement, as I said, with these airdrops, and a lot of people just think that it deserve more than what they've got. And the funny thing is, a lot of these people will literally just sell it as soon as they get it. They may not even kind of like need the money for any of the reasons that that Cobie's outlined here. They may just be selling it because they want to go buy some more stuff for themselves, right? Maybe some more luxuries, or maybe they want to kind of like increase their net worth, or maybe they want to stack more ETH instead of having OP. And it's kind of like, okay, well, should the airdrop have gone to those people to begin with? And who knows, right? Like, I'm not saying it should or shouldn't, and it's very, very hard to filter for that. But yeah, I think that just airdrops in general, there's a lot more kind of stuff that needs to go into it. I did praise Optimism's airdrop originally, and I still think it's better than prior ones because of the criteria that they use. And I'm not just saying that because I got a big airdrop from it. I think in general, widening the criteria set and still, instead of just using, hey, you used Optimism a couple times, here's some tokens, right? Or you used our app a couple times, here's some tokens. I think widening this set is really good. But, there has to be much more thought put into airdrops rather than just like the criteria that's required. And there needs to be kind of like much more thought put into tokens in general. Like, if people want, or if teams want, if projects want, if communities want the tokens that they love to stop going down only, they have to improve the tokenomics. Like, I've talked about Uni a bunch on the refuel before. I get that, potentially sometime in the future, Uniswap can turn on the fee take, and that fee take can go to Uni holders, and always kind of like well and good. But, the longer that takes, the less faith people have, and, that they just sell, right? Or they just don't buy Uni. And it's taken a while at this point. And the thing is that Uniswap's still young. I'm not saying whether they should or shouldn't, but, and I spoke about this yesterday, that Uniswap's governance is quite kind of like bad right now as well. I don't know if I talked about it yesterday. I was talking to someone about this where I basically said that, yeah, I was talking to someone on a call. I actually didn't say it on the refuel, but basically what I was saying was that I think a lot of people in this industry get the wrong idea about kind of like leadership and coordination roles. It doesn't mean that a project is centralized just because it has some sort of leadership or someone coordinating things. It's actually a really kind of like needed thing, because you've seen what happens to projects that don't have these roles in place. They kind of say, hey, we've got a token now, we're decentralizing to the community. And they kind of like put their DAO out there, and then they just kind of fail because no one's coordinating, no one's leading, and anyone who steps up to lead is usually not the right person for the job. Like, the funny thing about leadership voids is that they most of the time get filled by the wrong people. And you've seen this play out like plenty of times in crypto and outside of crypto. So those are all things to consider there. But I encourage you to read Cobie's kind of like forum post here and all the replies as well. Some of the probably most of the replies aren't really great, but there are some gems in there, some back and forth and things like that as well. So yeah, I think it's an interesting proposal overall. Again, it didn't come from the core team. Even if the core team thinks it's good or bad, it didn't come from them. It came from some random account on the forum. Now, whether the random account belongs to the core team, I don't know. But that random account definitely wasn't the core team on the face there. So, and nor do I think they really would be caring too much about this sort of stuff. Like, I feel like future airdrops, the way they're going to do it is probably going to be like, very different to the way they did the first airdrop. They're going to learn from it. They're going to be iterative with it, just like they're going to be iterative with their governance process. I kind of covered that last week, I believe, or the week before or something like that. But yeah, anyway, go check this out. I'll link it in the YouTube description. All right, so something that I kind of like want to talk about when it comes to, I guess, like Ethereum's dominance within the ecosystem. Now, this is a screenshot taken from cryptofees.info, which is one of my favorite websites for tracking various things within, the fee revenue of different crypto networks. Now, this is, so on there, they've got like apps and layer 1s and layer 2s and everything. So I've just filtered it to show layer 1s and layer 2s kind of like here. So basically what you can see from this is that the top 6 of the networks that are generating the most fee revenue are all EVM based. So Ethereum layer 1, obviously the EVM. Binance Smart Chain is literally a fork of Ethereum. It's just a centralized fork. Optimism is EVM equivalent layer 2. Arbitrum is EVM compatible. They use their own thing called the AVM, but it's basically functions the same way as the EVM. Avalanche, the C chain, is obviously like a straight fork of Geth. And Polygon, the POS chain, is also kind of like EVM equivalent there is forked, but like modified with their own consensus engine and things like that. So same with kind of like Avalanche, right? And then if you kind of like made your way down the list, like if I bring up crypto fees on kind of like here, there are a few others underneath, but I didn't feel like it was relevant. But there's Cardano, Nia, and then Phantom, another EVM chain, and then just like a bunch of inconsequential change. But Cardano has what, $17,000 of 24-hour fees. Nia is at $13,000 and Phantom is at $12,000. So again, inconsequential, just generally there. But yeah, you may be wondering why I look at fee revenue as something to be proud of or something that is kind of like important. It's because I think it's one of the hardest metrics to game. You can easily kind of like game or manipulate things like total value locked, active addresses, and other kind of metrics like that. But with fee revenue, it's extremely hard because of the fact that, I mean, at least on Ethereum layer 1, 80%-ish of those fees are burned. So like if you're trying to, and the rest of it go to miners. So even if kind of like miners wanted to, I don't know, for some reason make the fee revenue look larger than what it is, they could do that prior to 1559, and it might have kind of worked if they worked together. It's some kind of like weird thing, but post 1559, it's kind of like irrational because they'd be burning 80% of the money anyway, right? And the thing is, the reason why I look at kind of like fee revenue as well is it just represents block space demand. Like how in demand is block space? Well, Ethereum's block space is in extreme demand. That's why people have gone to other networks, either layer 1s, layer 2, sidechains, whatever you want to go to. That's the excess demand that's kind of like falling off. That's the people who can't afford Ethereum layer 1. And again, that's kind of like a result of the in-demand block space here. And you can see, obviously, Binance Smart Chain, I should say Optimism had a spike here because of the OP token launch. They're typically at around 50 to 100,000 one-day fees. Same with Arbitrum. Avalanche fees actually, the funny thing about Avalanche is, I think I mentioned this, but they basically, their fees and activity on the C chain collapsed because the thing that was driving most of the activity, some crab game, moved to its own subnet. So it kind of cannibalized itself there. And on Polygon, the fees are so cheap, even though they have lots of transactions more than Ethereum, it doesn't really add up to that much fee revenue. So, and Binance Smart Chain here is kind of a unique thing because you never hear anyone on crypto Twitter or anyone in the kind of like West really talking about it or using it, but it's very popular in Asia, from what I've heard and from my own investigation. So it is essentially like a shitcoin casino taken to the extreme. Most of the things on there are rugs. Most of the things are just kind of like shit coins that you gamble on kind of like all these kind of like dexes and things like that. And most of the people on there are literally just in it for the casino. It's basically the casino wing of Binance, right? And I don't think that's a good or bad thing. Like obviously these protocols are going to be used for whatever they're going to be used for because they're kind of like neutral, and Binance Smart Chain actually kind of like surprised me with the staying power that it's had. I thought it would have kind of like gone to the wayside, but yeah, it's had a lot of staying power here. But as I said, like particularly in Asia, not really that much in the West. All right, so what's my kind of like point here? Well, my point here is that the EVM, the Ethereum kind of like, I guess, architecture is just so stupidly popular and so widely used that even though it is strictly quote unquote worse technology, same with Solidity and, kind of like annoys a lot of developers, it's going to be used indefinitely. It's going to be like JavaScript. It's going to be ubiquitous. Everyone's going to know it. Like if you're in smart contracts, you have to learn Solidity, even if you're not kind of like going to be programming in it or going to be working on EVM or anything like that, because we've seen how hard it is to bootstrap other ecosystems. I mean, Solana is the biggest ecosystem outside the biggest ecosystem that uses something that is not an EVM, that is not Solidity, and they've struggled to gain adoption. That's one reason why they've struggled to gain adoption. I think the other things are like their network going offline as well. I mean, that happens way too frequently. I mean, it used to be a joke, but now it's happening every other day. It's kind of scary. I wouldn't trust any of my funds on that network, but I guess that's an aside to what I'm saying here. Basically, my point is, the EVM being such a moat is actually crazy good for Ethereum, even if it's not directly driving value to ETH as an asset. Because obviously, any of the activity on Binance Smart Chain is settled in BNB because you have to use BNB to pay the fees. It is not, settled in ETH, right? There's no ETH being paid for fees. Same with something like Avalanche. Same with Polygon even, because they use Matic, right? But I think, at least the POS chain for Polygon. But I think, obviously with the layer 2s, they use ETH as the gas token. They settle back to ETH for their security, pay ETH, burn ETH, all that good stuff. And obviously all of the value on layer 1 Ethereum flows to ETH. But I think there's also a bunch of secondary value that flows from these kind of other chains as well. Because think about it. People bridge in and out of Binance Smart Chain from Ethereum. They bridge in and out of, for Avalanche and Polygon as well. And that bridging incurs a fee on Ethereum layer 1. And there's also there's probably a lot of arbitrage that goes on between them, and maybe even multi-chain MEV. Maybe it's happening in a limited way right now, but I think that it might happen in a bigger way down the line. So there's always first and second order effects of this sort of stuff, but it just further reinforces and cements Ethereum's moat, because the EVM is just so, I guess, like prevalent within the ecosystem. And the last two things before I move on, the thing is that it's very easy for developers to redeploy their code to EVM networks because of the fact that they don't necessarily have to get new audits. They don't really have to change anything. The tooling remains the same. And the same is true for users. Like, to use any of these networks, all you have to do is change your RPC in MetaMask, and it's pretty much the exact same experience as Layer 1 Ethereum, just with different fees, essentially, right? So from that point of view, that's why kind of like these things are so dominant, and that just kind of like keeps building the network effect, keeps reinforcing it. I think it's pretty interesting. So yeah, just wanted to kind of like say some things about that. But moving on. So the former employee of NFT marketplace OpenSea, Nate, is being charged in the first ever digital asset insider trading scheme. For those of you who don't know the backstory here, Nate was the head of product, I believe, at OpenSea, got caught doing insider trading by buying some NFTs before they were available to the public, I believe. Or sorry, he was buying NFTs that he knew was going to be on the that were going to be on the front page of OpenSea, and I don't think he made much money from it. I think it was like a few tens of thousands of dollars. It wasn't really that much, but essentially he's been charged here for insider trading, which is from the Department of Justice in the US, which is, I guess, interesting and scary, right? I don't have a legal opinion on this. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but what my opinion on this basically falls down to, I'm going to be watching this closely because NFTs aren't securities, right? At least they aren't the SEC isn't classifying them as securities. They haven't brought any kind of like, I guess, as far as I know, cases against NFT issuers to kind of like register as a security. And if NFTs are securities, does that make every collectible a security? Does that make my Pokemon cards a security? Do I have insider information when I trade my Pokemon cards or buy things because of my insider trading? If I have some kind of information that someone else doesn't have access to due to these things, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of weird when you think about it, because at the end of the day, like NFTs, yes, they're financialized products, yes, they're on chain, but I think they're distinctly different from something like a normal ERC20 token. So I'm going to be watching this case closely. I don't know. Like, I mean, I think obviously this is weird as well for the fact that like Nate did some he did insider trading, but it was like such a small kind of like a thing for him to do, when he was at OpenSea, and he's being charged for it. But there's scams, Ponzi's, grifts, all these sorts of stuff happening all the time. There are centralized exchanges doing insider trading against their customers all the time, and nothing happens to them. So basically what this shows to me is the Department of Justice is going after the easy targets, the ones who probably don't have the money to defend themselves, so they can set precedent, right? And as I said, I'm not a lawyer, don't have legal experience, but this is just my read on it. Because if they were to go after one of the, I don't know, centralized exchanges for insider trading, they have to have a pretty ironclad case against them. And they know that if they go after them, they're going to be in court for a long time because they can the defendant will be able to afford, an all-star kind of like kick-ass legal team that will drag it out for years to come. Whereas with Nate here, OpenSea's not putting up any legal defense for him. He's not even at OpenSea anymore. He's going to have to fork out for it on his own, and he's probably not going to be able to do that. He's probably just going to say to them, okay, well, what's the deal here? Like, what deal can I take? And there's probably going to be a deal of whatever. Like, maybe there's a fine, maybe there's some I don't know if he'd get prism time over this. It kind of seems extreme there, but maybe there's kind of like a fine. Maybe he gets banned from trading, any kind of assets for a while, whatever, right? So I think it's all about precedent. It's all about kind of fear mongering as well, and kind of like scaring other people. But at the end of the day, I feel like, look at Do Kwon. Like, he's still out there. He's still doing things. Like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just kind of running it through my head right now, and I can't really describe how like just frustrating this is to me personally, after being in this ecosystem for so long, seeing so many scammers and grifters and insider traders get away with things, and then the Department of Justice in the US goes after this person who, yes, okay, he did some insider trading, but the value of what he did was so low. And this is just kind of like one guy. It's not like he had a whole operation of insider trading, and he was already fired. I don't know. I feel sorry for Nate, and that's a funny thing to say. I can't remember if I don't think I went hard at him when this first happened. I'm pretty sure I talked about it on the Refuel. Obviously, insider trading is, he's wrong. Obviously, what he did was wrong, but I really feel sorry for him because now he's going to be made an example of. He's not going to be able to afford a kick-ass legal team. He's not going to be able to defend himself against this. He's going to probably have some public servant who basically says, kid, like, take the fucking deal because you're going to go to jail if you don't, or you're going to go bankrupt, or you're going to go broke, right? So I think he's going to end up taking a deal or something. And as I said, I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's going to get prison time for this. That would be really extreme. And in that case, I would kind of like be like, yeah, this is just ridiculous. Like, I'm pretty sure people would probably rally around raising money for him to get a better lawyer at that point. Because if the DOJ could kind of like get him put in prison for this, like they'll go after a lot of other people with precedent as well. So it's kind of scary there. But again, not a lawyer. If you think I'm completely off base here and completely wrong, let me know if you have legal experience. But that's kind of like my view on things. All right, Peter from the Geth team put out an interesting tweet today where he said, hey world, it feels odd that I have to tell you this, but blockchains aren't here to take your lunch. We don't want to replace the way you do you. We want to extend what's possible and create new ways to do new things. We don't want to redo old stuff. We want to explore. So this is kind of like what I've been saying for a while as well. Like, I don't believe what we're building in Ethereum is meant to take down the evil banks and evil traditional finance system and evil institutions that exist today. Ethereum is just building better and, well, potentially better and kind of like newer and more efficient institutions that people can opt into using instead of using the existing system. So, for example, people can opt into using DeFi instead of using TradFi, right? For a variety of different things. Obviously, you can't do everything in DeFi that you can do in TradFi right now. Obviously, it's riskier, but that's an option. People can opt into using decentralized social media, right? Something like Lens Protocol instead of using a Web 2 platform. Obviously, this stuff's still early, but you kind of like get where I'm going with this. It's not about taking down anything. It's about kind of like developing new ways of doing things and new ecosystems, as kind of like Peter says here, in order to give people a choice. So I just kind of like wanted to highlight this because I think it's an extremely important point that a lot of people kind of like don't get, because I think what happens is, especially people outside of crypto, they see the Bitcoin community, which is very much about tearing down like the Fed, tearing down fiat, making sure all these institutions collapse, tearing down the banks, which is ironic because they always celebrate whenever the banks are adopting Bitcoin. But anyway, and I think people see that and they kind of like attribute that to the rest of the ecosystem, which couldn't be further from the truth for the Ethereum ecosystem. I have not seen many people in the Ethereum ecosystem kind of champion kind of like tearing down things or kind of like calling things evil or anything like that. It's more about building new and better systems. So just kind of like wanted to highlight that from Peter here. All right, so Voltz Protocol is now live on mainnet in an alpha launch state. So the alpha launch means that the LP is capped at $1.5 million per pool. Don't know if this has been kind of like reached already, the cap here, but yeah. So basically what you can do with Voltz is trade rates with leverage for the first time in DeFi, earn market neutral yield, and build the future of finance. So you can opt in, change everything. There's a little video here if you want to check that out, and you can join their Discord channel. So yeah, this is pretty cool. I mean, disclosure here, I'm an investor in Voltz kind of like protocol here. They've been heads down building for quite a while, and now it's finally live on mainnet, which is really, really awesome. So basically what Voltz is in a nutshell, and they describe themselves as a non-custodial automated market maker for interest rate swaps. Now, if you don't know, I mean, I think a lot of you would know what an AMM is, like it's Uniswap based. I mean, Uniswap's an AMM, right? But if you don't know what interest rate swaps are, you got to go learn it, right? Like, I mean, this is something that normal, regular people in the traditional finance system will pretty much never touch. It's not something that you need to touch, really. It's something that a lot of traditional finance people do, something that a lot of banks do. It's very important to their day-to-day, but it's definitely not something that you and I have to worry about. But now with DeFi, you get the opportunity to do this sorts of stuff if you want to. So you can go check it out. I'll link this in the YouTube description. But yeah, this is cool. Cool to see it on mainnet. Cool to see, I guess, like you'd be able to trade these rates with leverage as well. So if you're like DJing, you can go leverage. I know I tell you guys not to leverage all the time, but I know some of you are just going to do it anyway. So this gives you the ability to do it, right? I'm of the opinion that like we shouldn't not build tools just because they're risky and dangerous. We should build all the tools that we can, and people should be able to do whatever they want with them, but we should still warn them of the kind of like risks as well. And I actually like how Voltz is launching with a cap per pool. They're not just going full DGen where they're like, hey, everyone throw lots of money into this and it'll all be good. No, I mean, this is a new protocol on mainnet. Got to obviously run it through its kind of like paces here, and make sure that everything's running smoothly before putting more and more money in. But also not just kind of like security-wise, but also the mechanism of how Voltz Protocol works as well. So you can go check that out if you haven't yet. All right, so the EF Ecosystem Support Program has published their latest grantee roundup. So basically, for those of you who don't know, the ESP or Ecosystem Support Program gives money to various teams within the ecosystem to build various things. So this update highlights Nimbest for their Fluffy portal client and portal network development, which is basically working on light clients for Ethereum, and Paul Miller for Ethereum cryptography improvements as well. So you can read the blog post for a full breakdown here. I just wanted to highlight that for you guys. I'm coming up on time here, so I'm going to try and get through the rest of these updates. Coinbase Cloud today announced that they have donated or committed $1 million for public goods funding through Gitcoin, including $200,000 for the upcoming grants round 14. This is awesome. I love this. I mean, the funny thing is, Coinbase Cloud, I mentioned them yesterday, how they've done really well with client diversity on the Beacon Chain front. They seem to really care about Ethereum beyond just kind of like profiting from it as a kind of like exchange, right? I mean, Coinbase Cloud is obviously part of Coinbase. They profit off of Ethereum by kind of like enabling trading of ETH and the other Ethereum-based assets and stuff like that. But they're also giving a lot back. They're obviously a staking service provider. They care about client diversity. They kind of like listened to us when we said, hey guys, you need to get that Prism usage down. And now they're kind of like donating $1 million to public goods funding, which, I mean, you guys know I'm a public goods maximalist. I love seeing this sorts of stuff, but I think it sends a strong signal when companies like Coinbase do these sorts of things, because it basically says, hey, yes, we're a centralized company. Yes, we kind of like are a for-profit company, but we can still give to public goods. We can still kind of like give lots of money to public goods, and you should as well. So very, very cool to see this, and thank you to Coinbase for putting money towards public goods. All right, so May was another record month for ENS. So there was 365,000 new .eth registrations last month. There was $9.6 million in protocol revenue, 3,900 ETH in fees, 57,000 new ETH accounts with at least one ENS name, and 10,500 ETH of OpenSea volume. And you can see the chart here comparing it to other months. ENS is on a tear. That's pretty crazy, right? I mean, you can see back in November-ish, I guess, when the token launched, obviously they had a spike in activity, and then there was, kind of like a lull there, but it still ended up kind of like higher than it was before the token. But now we just had 2 straight months of like really, really awesome growth. So amazing to see this. I mentioned yesterday how I thought ENS was one of the only sustainable applications in kind of like Ethereum right now. And, this is proof of that, I think. So yeah, congrats to ENS on this growth here. I'd love to see it continue. All right, so another project that caught my eye today is one that I haven't talked about before. It's coming from kind of like GFX Labs, and today they basically said in a tweet here, today GFX Labs is proud to introduce the world to Interest Protocol or Interest DeFi or IP. It's the next step in the evolution of DeFi. It inherits most of the strengths of Maker, Aave, and Compound while removing weaknesses here. So how does it work? Basically, IP or kind of like Interest Protocol provides over-collateralized loans to borrowers. These loans are denominated in USDI, which is IP's new stablecoin, and USDI can also be minted by depositing USDC. USDI rebases to reflect accrued interest. All USDI earns interest, and all USDI can be redeemed for USDC. Now, rebases doesn't mean this is an algorithmic stablecoin. It is tied to kind of like USDC here, and rebases based on kind of the interest accrued. It doesn't rebase based on some arbitrary rule set that will lead to a death spiral. So just want to kind of get that out there. And you know, it's got like kind of like a normal money market. Rates for depositors and borrowers are determined by IP's interest rate curve. High utilization means high interest rates to attract deposits, while low utilization encourages borrowing. At every utilization rate, IP bests Aave and a Compound a borrowing rate. So basically a competitor to the existing money markets out there. It's cool to see that they're accepting 3 collateral right now from launch: ETH or wrapped ETH, wrapped Bitcoin, and Uni. Uni is an interesting choice there. I think maybe its liquidity profile is good enough to have them kind of like on board here, but I'm sure they're going to onboard other assets as time goes on. So if you're looking for a new kind of like money market protocol to kind of like look into, and one that does things a little bit differently with that kind of like rebasing for reflecting the interest here, definitely go give Interest Protocol a look. You can go check out this. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, so Immutable announced today that they're launching their first prototype of their end-user reward system. So for a limited period of time, trades on any supported marketplace on Immutable can be eligible to get part of a $2 million reward pool, which is denominated in IMX tokens. So if you're an Immutable user, definitely keep this in mind. You may be eligible for some of these rewards if you are on there, kind of like trading NFTs or kind of like interacting with marketplace with the various marketplaces on there. There's a few on there now. I think, you know, they've got the Gods Unchained, you got Illuvium, there's a few other Guild of Guardians and some other kind of like games on there, and they're onboarding more all the time. So definitely a lot to do on Immutable these days. So, you know, and you're going to get rewarded for it, potentially rewarded for it in IMX tokens starting June 2nd, so starting today. So definitely check this out for more details. I'll link it in the YouTube description. All right, finally here, I just wanted to give a kind of like quick shout out to Michael Sproul here for kind of he's put together a new staking machine in preparation for the merge. You can see the specs there, but what I love about kind of like when people share this is everyone's got their own kind of like unique setup. Like you can see here, he's got like this pink Silverstone case, which is just really cool, really eye-catching. Could you imagine someone coming over to his house and kind of looking at that and being like, hey man, like what's that? Like that's cool. And then he'd be like, oh, it's my staking box. And he could probably get into a conversation with someone and explain what staking is, what Ethereum is. And it's kind of like a conversation starter. And I've said this before about my own box, which used to be behind me, but now it's like over there. In the old videos, you can see it, my staking box. But it definitely is a conversation starter with people, and I get to kind of like ETH pill them to some extent. So, and what I love about kind of like at-home staking like this is that you can do anything you want. You can have any case you want. You can put it in a desk. Like there's PCs that people put into desks. You can mount it on a wall. You can have like a really fancy case. And kind of like get creative with it, right? Get creative with the specs, kind of like get creative with everything. And I think it's just really cool. And I just wanted to kind of like highlight that, because if you are someone who solo stakes, make it interesting, right? Like if you actually, I mean, if you're into it, like maybe you're not into that sort of stuff, but I mean, me personally, I love building computers. I built computers since I was like 13 years old. I love everything got to do with technology. I mean, I built this bad boy behind me. This is my main computer. It's huge. It's the Corsair 1000D case. It's like a meter high. But like I built all that, and I'm adding stuff to it all the time and kind of tinkering with stuff. And I have other computers that I built too around me, obviously my staking box and a bunch of other things. I just love it. And what I love about my staking box is that I built it, put it there. It's been humming along. You know, I sometimes kind of like upgrade it, had more storage space from time to time as well. But yeah, I just love kind of like all that sorts of stuff. But anyway, I think on that note, I'm going to end it there. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.